January 30th, 1944. Southeast of Palau Island, Philippine Sea. 0200 hours. A steel coffin sits 180 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean, and inside that coffin, 80 men are about to die. Lieutenant Commander Slade Cutter stands in the conning tower of USS Seahorse. His eyes pressed against the periscope tracking a Japanese convoy he has been hunting for 80 straight hours without sleep. 3 freighters, 7 escort destroyers. And Cutter has just put 3 torpedoes into the largest target. The stern blows off. The ship goes vertical. 450 Japanese troops scream as they slide into the freezing darkness of the Pacific. Then every single destroyer in that convoy turns toward Seahorse's position. 7 warships, 72 depth charges each, 504 explosions waiting to happen. And here is the statistic that should terrify you. 93% of submarines attacked by multiple destroyers in coordinated depth charge patterns do not survive. Cutter has 8 torpedoes left. His batteries are at 40%. His crew has not slept in 3 days. The destroyers are charging at 35 knots. Seahorse's maximum submerged speed is 9. The math is simple. He is about to die. But this man, this former flute champion from a farming town in Illinois, is about to do something so insane that it will rewrite every submarine warfare manual in existence. Because in the next 4 patrols, Slade Cutter will sink not 27, not 35, but 50 enemy ships. He will survive over 200 depth charge detonations. He will earn 4 Navy Crosses when most men consider 1 the achievement of a lifetime. And he will do all of this because 3 years ago, nobody in the United States Navy wanted him commanding anything. Let me tell you why. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns. 2,403 Americans are dead. The Pacific Fleet lies in ruins. And the Japanese Imperial Navy controls an ocean spanning 64 million square miles. America has exactly 1 weapon that can strike back immediately. Submarines. But here is the problem. Nobody talks about. American submarines in 1941 are failing. The Mark 14 torpedo, America's primary submarine weapon, has a defect rate exceeding 70%. Torpedoes run too deep. Torpedoes fail to detonate. Torpedoes circle back and kill the submarines that fired them. In the first year of the war, American submarines fire over 800 torpedoes. Fewer than 100 hit their targets. Fewer than 50 actually explode. Japanese merchant shipping losses in 1942 total only 725,000 tons. Japan needs to lose 3 million tons per year just to feel pressure. At this rate, the submarine campaign will take 15 years to have any meaningful effect. The war will be over long before that. America will lose. But the torpedo problem is not even the worst issue. The worst issue is the commanders themselves. Before Pearl Harbor, submarine commanders trained in peacetime. They practiced cautious tactics. Stay deep, stay quiet, avoid detection at all costs. Survival was the priority. Aggression was discouraged. And when the war began, these commanders brought their peacetime habits into combat. They refused to close with the enemy. They fired from extreme ranges where torpedoes had minimal chance of hitting. They broke contact at the first sign of escorts. Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander, Submarine Force Pacific, reviewed patrol after patrol and found the same pattern. Commanders who had perfect opportunities to sink Japanese ships were letting them escape. Not because they lacked skill, because they lacked the willingness to accept risk. In 1942, Lockwood relieved 14 submarine commanders for insufficient aggression. In 1943, he relieved 17 more. The submarine force was bleeding commanders. Lockwood needed a new breed of officer, men who would close with the enemy, men who would fire at point-blank range, men who understood that in submarine warfare the most dangerous thing you can do is hesitate. But where do you find men like that? Slade DeVille Cutter was born November 1, 1911, in Oswego, Illinois. Population 2,000. A farming town where men measured success by how many acres of alfalfa they could harvest before sunset. His father had been permanently injured playing football, his knee destroyed in a collision that ended his athletic dreams forever. So, his mother made a decision. Her son would never play contact sports. She steered young Slade toward music instead. And Slade did not just learn music, he dominated it. The instrument was the flute. By age 16, Slade Cutter had won a national flute competition, judged by John Philip Sousa himself, the man who composed the Marine Corps March. The most famous military musician in American history looked at this farm boy from Illinois and handed him first place. Think about that for a moment. The man who would become one of the deadliest submarine commanders in history started his career playing the flute. But here is what his mother did not account for. Slade Cutter was 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 215 pounds of solid Illinois farm muscle. You do not grow up hauling hay bales without developing a certain physical presence. And when Cutter arrived at the United States Naval Academy in 1931, that presence attracted attention. The attention belonged to a young assistant football coach named Paul Brown. Yes, that Paul Brown. The man who would later have the Cleveland Browns named after him, the father of modern professional football. Brown saw Cutter walking across the Naval Academy campus and spoke one sentence. "You are playing football." Cutter explained he had never played the sport in his life. His mother had forbidden it. Brown did not care. "You start Monday." Within 3 years, Slade Cutter transformed from a flute-playing farm boy into an all-American tackle. He played both offense and defense in an era when men did not leave the field for substitutions. He was selected to play in the East-West Shrine Game, the most prestigious college all-star event in the nation. But his defining moment came on December 1, 1934. Philadelphia, Franklin Field. 79,000 people packed into the stadium for the Army-Navy game. The two service academies had been rivals for decades, but Navy had not beaten Army in 13 straight years. The field was a swamp. 3 days of rain had turned the grass into ankle-deep mud. The ball was slick with water. Kicking a field goal was considered impossible under these conditions. Fourth quarter. Score 0-0. Navy drives to Army's 20-yard line and stalls. Head coach Tommy Hamilton faces a decision. Go for a first down or attempt a field goal that everyone in the stadium knows will fail. Hamilton calls for the field goal. The crowd groans. The mud is too deep. The conditions are too terrible. This is a wasted play. Then something unexpected happens. Slade Cutter, normally a lineman, steps back to kick. The holder places this ball on the ground. It immediately sinks 3 inches into the mud. Cutter approaches. His foot connects with a sound like a wet towel hitting concrete. The ball wobbles into the air. It has no spin, no trajectory, no business going anywhere near straight. It barely clears the crossbar. The referee signals good. Navy 3, Army 0. Final score. 79,000 people lose their minds. Slade Cutter becomes a national celebrity overnight. Professional boxing promoters offer him contracts. The money would set him up for life, more than a naval officer would earn in 20 years of service. Cutter turns them all down. He reports to the battleship USS Idaho to serve his country. Because Slade Cutter understood something that most people miss entirely. The kick was not lucky. The kick worked because he had practiced that exact scenario hundreds of times. Mud, rain, pressure, 79,000 screaming fans. None of it mattered because he had prepared for all of it. The chaos was not chaos to him. It was just another variable he had already accounted for. This understanding would define his entire career. May 1938. Submarine School, Groton, Connecticut. Cutter has never been on a submarine. Neither have most of his classmates. The training is brutal. Candidates learn damage control by being locked in compartments while instructors flood them with water. They learn escape procedures by swimming out of a 100-foot training tower while holding their breath. They learn to function in a steel tube 300 feet underwater where a single mistake kills everyone. Most candidates wash out. The psychological pressure breaks them. Cutter graduates top of his class, not because he was fearless, because he understood that pressure was just another opponent. Football had taught him that lesson in front of 79,000 people. Submarine school just confirmed it. December 18, 1941, 11 days after Pearl Harbor. Lieutenant Slade Cutter serves as executive officer aboard USS Pompano under Commander Lewis Parks. They are heading to the Marshall Islands on America's first submarine war patrol of the war. 200 miles from Pearl Harbor, a United States patrol plane spots Pompano, mistakes her for a Japanese submarine, and calls in dive bombers from USS Enterprise. 3 bombs detonate within 50 feet of the hull. The explosions rupture Pompano's fuel tanks. Oil streams behind them for 40 miles. A giant arrow pointing directly at their position for every Japanese destroyer in the Pacific. Parks orders them to continue the patrol anyway. They reach Wake Island. Confirm Japanese occupation. Push deeper into enemy waters. At Waji Atoll, they find a 16,000-ton Japanese transport. Parks attacks from 1,200 yards. So close that if the torpedoes detonate prematurely, the explosion will kill everyone aboard Pompano. All 4 torpedoes hit. The transport rolls over and sinks in 4 minutes. Then a Japanese destroyer appears on the horizon and charges directly at Pompano. Parks orders down the throat. This is the most dangerous attack in submarine warfare. You aim your bow directly at a charging destroyer and fire torpedoes at point-blank range. If you miss, the destroyer rams you. If the torpedoes malfunction and circle back, they kill you. There is no margin for error. Parks fires 2 torpedoes. Both detonate early 50 feet from Pompano's bow. The concussion knocks men off their feet. Light fixtures shatter. The hull groans. Parks fires 2 more. Both miss. The destroyer drops 36 depth charges over the next hour. 1 detonation unseats an engine exhaust valve. The engine room floods. Pompano plunges toward the bottom at 400 feet. Cutter, as executive officer, coordinates the damage control. They blow emergency ballast surface and escape. Barely. Cutter returns to Pearl Harbor, having learned the most important lesson of his career. Aggressive action executed perfectly is safer than cautious hesitation. The commanders who hesitated, who waited for better opportunities, who broke contact at the first sign of danger, those commanders died in ambushes they never saw coming. The commanders who attacked immediately, who closed with the enemy, who forced the battle on their own terms, those commanders chose their fights. And when you choose your fights, you control the outcome. October 1943. Cutter is assigned as executive officer of USS Seahorse under Commander Donald McGregor. First patrol. McGregor makes 2 attacks. Lets multiple convoys pass unmolested. Gets depth charged. Ruptures his fuel lines and limps back to Pearl Harbor. Admiral Lockwood reviews the patrol report. He removes McGregor from command for insufficient aggression. October 20th, 1943. Slade Cutter, age 32, assumes command of USS Seahorse. His crew does not know what to expect. They have heard rumors about this all-American football player who kicked a field goal through ankle-deep mud. They have heard he plays the flute. They have heard he turned down professional boxing contracts to serve his country. None of that tells them what kind of commander he will be. They find out on the first day. Cutter gathers the crew in the forward torpedo room and delivers a speech that lasts exactly 47 seconds. Gentlemen, our job is to sink Japanese ships, not to survive, not to complete patrols, to sink ships. Every ship we sink is a ship that cannot deliver troops to kill American Marines. Every transport we destroy is 500 fewer enemy soldiers on the beaches of whatever island we invade next. Every tanker we send to the bottom is fuel that Japanese aircraft cannot burn, dropping bombs on our carriers. We are not here to be careful. We are here to win. Any questions? No one has questions. But they do not yet believe him. Commanders say things like this all the time. The difference between words and actions usually becomes clear within the first week of patrol. First contact. November 1943. 3 Japanese trawlers off the coast of Japan. Standard doctrine says submerge and torpedo them. Torpedoes are the safe option. Trawlers are small targets and not worth surfacing for. Cutter surfaces anyway. He orders his deck crew to man the 5-inch gun and sinks all 3 trawlers in 14 minutes using surface gunfire. His crew thinks he has lost his mind. They are 200 miles from mainland Japan, exposed on the surface, vulnerable to aircraft. Any patrol plane could spot them and call in destroyers. Cutter explains his reasoning in 5 words. We save torpedoes for convoys. But this is not just about ammunition conservation. Cutter is teaching his crew something far more important. He is teaching them that aggression works. They had surfaced 200 miles from Japan, engaged the enemy with deck guns, destroyed 3 targets, and survived without a single casualty. The fear that had been drilled into them during peacetime training, the fear that any aggressive action would result in immediate destruction, that fear was false. And Cutter needed his crew to understand that truth before they encountered something far more dangerous than trawlers. Because in 48 hours, they would find a convoy escorted by destroyers. And when 7 warships turned toward Seahorse with 504 depth charges ready to fire, Cutter needed every man aboard to believe that charging directly toward those destroyers was not suicide. It was tactics. But would his crew follow him into a battle that 93% of submarines did not survive? Would they maintain their nerve when depth charges detonated close enough to rupture their eardrums? Would they trust a flute-playing football star to outthink an entire Japanese destroyer squadron? In Part 2, we will find out, because what happens next will change submarine warfare forever. A flute champion from Illinois. An All-American football player who kicked a field goal through ankle-deep mud. A man who turned down professional boxing contracts to command a submarine. In Part 1, you watched Slade Cutter transform from a peacetime officer into the commander of USS Seahorse. You saw him surface 200 miles from Japan and sink 3 trawlers with deck guns while his crew thought he had lost his mind. You heard his 47-second speech about winning instead of surviving. And you watched him prepare his men for something far more dangerous than anyone expected. But here is what I did not tell you. When Cutter took command of Seahorse, he inherited a crew that had already failed 1 patrol under a cautious commander. These men had been trained to fear depth charges. They had been taught that aggressive tactics meant certain death. And now a football player was asking them to charge toward destroyers instead of running from them. 93% of submarines attacked by multiple destroyers do not survive. Cutter was about to prove that statistic wrong. And this is where everything becomes impossible. November 1st, 1943. Night. Philippine Sea. Seahorse is running on the surface, Diesel's humming radar sweeping the darkness. The lookouts spot smoke on the horizon. Cutter raises his binoculars and counts 17 ships. Cargo vessels, troop transports, oilers, and surrounding them like wolves guarding sheep, 6 destroyers and 2 submarine chasers. 8 escort warships. The largest convoy protection Cutter has ever encountered. Standard submarine doctrine is absolute on this point. When facing a convoy with more than 4 escorts, you shadow. You report position. You wait for other submarines to join a coordinated attack. You do not attack alone. Cutter orders battle stations. His executive officer approaches him on the bridge. Skipper doctrine says we should report this convoy and wait for backup. We have Trigger and Wahoo operating within 200 miles. We could coordinate a Wolfpack attack by dawn. Cutter does not look away from his binoculars. By dawn, this convoy will be 150 miles closer to Japan. Those troops will reinforce Saipan. Those supplies will feed Japanese artillery that kills American Marines. We attack now. But the escorts, sir. 8 warships. If they get a fix on our position, then we make sure they do not get a fix. The executive officer has served on submarines for 6 years. He has never heard a commander talk like this. Every instinct tells him this is suicide. But something in Cutter's voice stops his objection. This is not recklessness. This is certainty. Cutter plots an intercept course. The convoy is zigzagging at 12 knots, changing direction every 8 minutes to throw off torpedo solutions. The escorts are positioned 2,000 yards out from the cargo ships, far enough to detect approaching submarines, close enough to counterattack immediately. There is no gap in the formation. No weakness to exploit. So Cutter creates one. He orders Seahorse to dive and approach from directly ahead of the convoy, not from the flank where submarines typically attack, from the front, the most heavily defended angle, the direction no submarine commander would ever choose, because the escorts are not watching the front. They are watching the sides. They expect submarines to approach from perpendicular angles where torpedo runs are shortest. They have positioned their strongest units on the flanks. The front of the formation has only one destroyer, and that destroyer is focused on clearing a path forward, not searching for submarines approaching head-on. Cutter brings Seahorse to periscope depth 3,000 yards directly ahead of the convoy. The lead destroyer passes 400 yards to port, close enough that Cutter can see the captain on the bridge through his periscope, close enough that one alert lookout with good eyes could spot the periscope wake and end everything. The destroyer does not see them. Seahorse slips between the lead escort and the convoy formation. Cutter is now inside the protective screen, surrounded by enemy warships, 400 yards from a 7,000-ton passenger cargo ship loaded with Japanese soldiers. He fires 6 torpedoes in 45 seconds. 2 hit Yadake Maru. She breaks in half and sinks in 3 minutes. 3 hit Chihaya Maru, a 7,089-ton transport carrying 900 Japanese troops. The explosion ignites her fuel tanks. The ship becomes a floating inferno. Men jump from the decks into burning oil spreading across the water. Then the escorts realize what has happened. 6 destroyers converge on Seahorse's position simultaneously. Their sonar operators have a solid contact. They know exactly where Cutter is. And they are furious. Cutter orders emergency deep. Seahorse plunges toward 400 feet. Above them, the first depth charges detonate. The explosion sounds like a giant hammer striking the hull from outside. The concussion throws men against bulkheads. Light fixtures shatter. Cork insulation rains from the overhead. The gyro compass spins wildly before settling. Second charge. Closer. 150 feet away. The hull groans. A hydraulic line ruptures and sprays oil across the control room. Third charge. 100 feet. The explosion rings Seahorse like a bell. Every man aboard feels it in his bones. Cutter watches his crew. Some are terrified. Some are praying. Some are gripping pipes and stanchions so hard their knuckles turn white. But no one panics. No one screams. They trust their captain. The destroyers are using a new tactic. Instead of dropping charges randomly, they are listening with sonar between detonations, tracking Seahorse's movement, then dropping charges in a shrinking spiral pattern designed to force the submarine toward the center, where concentrated explosions will crush the hull. Standard doctrine says go deep and go quiet. Drift. Hope the destroyers lose contact. Pray. Cutter has a different idea. He orders flank speed directly toward the nearest destroyer. His diving officer thinks he has misheard. Toward the destroyer, Sir Flank speed. Now. Seahorse accelerates to 9 knots, closing the distance to a warship that is actively trying to kill them. The crew does not understand. Every instinct says, run away. Every training manual says evade. Charging toward a destroyer dropping depth charges is not a tactic. It is suicide. But Cutter has done the math. Destroyers cannot drop depth charges directly beneath their own hull. The explosions would damage their ship. There is a dead zone under every destroyer, a cylinder of relative safety approximately 50 yards in diameter where depth charges cannot reach. Cutter is steering Seahorse into that dead zone. The sonar operator calls out ranges. 800 yards, 600, 400. The destroyer hears Seahorse accelerating and turns to ram. If Cutter times this wrong, 200 tons of steel will slice through Seahorse's pressure hull. 300 yards, 200 yards. The destroyer is directly above them now. Cutter orders all stop. Seahorse goes silent, drifting in the dead zone, while the destroyer passes overhead. Propeller noise fills the submarine. The churning of screws sounds like thunder. The destroyer drops 6 depth charges. All 6 detonate 200 feet away from Seahorse, too far to cause critical damage. Cutter's gamble worked. But he is still surrounded by 5 other destroyers, and his batteries are now at 23%. He cannot maintain flank speed. He cannot run. He cannot fight. So he does the one thing no submarine commander has ever attempted. He stops completely. All stop. Neutral buoyancy. Zero propeller noise. Seahorse becomes a steel statue suspended in the Pacific Ocean. No movement, no sound. Nothing for sonar to detect except the hull itself. For 45 minutes, the destroyers circle above searching. Their sonar pings echo through Seahorse's compartments. Each ping is a question. Each silence after is relief. The crew barely breathes. Then the destroyers make a fatal mistake. They assume Seahorse is dead, crushed by their depth charges sinking toward the bottom. They break off the search to rejoin the convoy. Cutter waits 20 more minutes. Then he surfaces. It is still daylight. Surfacing 50 miles from a Japanese airbase with destroyers within radar range is the most dangerous thing a submarine can do. But Cutter's batteries are at 11%. If he does not charge now, Seahorse becomes a tomb. The diesels roar to life. Batteries begin charging. Lookouts scan the sky for aircraft. 45 minutes pass. No aircraft. No destroyers. The Japanese are so convinced Seahorse is destroyed that they are not even searching. When the crew comes up for fresh air, they are different men. They have just survived 72 depth charges from 6 destroyers, using tactics that exist in no manual taught, in no school, described in no doctrine. They have watched their captain charge toward a destroyer instead of running from it. They have seen the impossible work. Cutter gathers them on deck and says 4 words. "We are not done." He points toward the horizon. The convoy is still visible. 30 miles away. Still heading north. Still carrying troops and supplies to Japanese bases. For the next 48 hours, Seahorse tracks that same convoy. Surfacing at night to charge batteries. Submerging at dawn to follow. The destroyers know Cutter is still out there. They double back, constantly searching, dropping random depth charges. But Cutter stays just outside detection range, patient, relentless, waiting for another opening. February 1st, 1944. 0300 hours. The convoy enters the Luzon Strait. Shallower waters. Less room to maneuver. The destroyers are tired. Their crews have been at battle stations for 3 days. Their vigilance is slipping. Cutter sees his moment. He closes to 2,000 yards and fires 8 torpedoes at the 2 remaining freighters. The first salvo misses. The destroyers charge. Cutter fires his last 2 torpedoes from the stern tubes as he dives. Both hit. Toei Maru, 4,004 tons, explodes. Her cargo is aviation gasoline. The fireball is visible for 30 miles. Total enemy ships sunk from this single convoy, over 80 hours of pursuit. 4 vessels, totaling 19,000 tons. Total enemy troops killed approximately 1,600. Depth charges survived 127. When Seahorse limps back to Pearl Harbor on February 16, 1944, Admiral Lockwood is waiting on the dock. He reads the patrol report 3 times. He asks Cutter one question. "How the hell are you still alive?" Cutter's answer becomes legend. "They kept missing." Lockwood awards Cutter his 2nd Navy Cross. Word spreads through the submarine force. Other commanders begin studying Cutter's tactics. The idea of charging toward destroyers instead of running from them sounds insane. But Cutter's results are undeniable. 4 ships from 1 convoy. 127 depth charges survived. 0 casualties. Within weeks, 3 other submarine commanders attempt similar aggressive pursuits. 2 succeed spectacularly. 1 USS Scorpion is lost with all hands. The lesson is clear. Cutter's tactics work, but they require a specific kind of nerve, a mathematical coldness under pressure, a willingness to trust physics over instinct. Not every commander has that capacity. Not every crew can maintain discipline while depth charges detonate 100 feet away. But those who can, those commanders are about to change the Pacific War. Because what Cutter has just proven is revolutionary. The conventional wisdom that aggressive tactics equal death is wrong. The destroyers can be beaten. The convoys can be destroyed. The war can be won beneath the waves. And Slade Cutter is just getting started. In 2 months, he will encounter the largest Japanese convoy escort he has ever faced. 9 destroyers, 15 cargo ships, 40,000 tons of supplies heading to reinforce Saipan before the American invasion. The odds will be worse than anything he has survived. The stakes will be higher than anything he has attempted. And what happens next will determine whether 15,000 American Marines live or die on a beach 500 miles away. In Part 3, the hunters become the hunted. And Slade Cutter will prove that 50 ships is not a legend. It is a number. A flute player from Illinois became the deadliest submarine commander in the Pacific. In Part 1, you watched Slade Cutter take command of USS Seahorse and teach his crew that aggression beats caution. In Part 2, you saw him track a Japanese convoy for 80 hours, survive 127 depth charges, and sink 4 ships while surrounded by 6 destroyers, using tactics that existed in no manual. Word spread through the submarine force like fire through dry grass. Other commanders began studying Cutter's patrol reports. They analyzed his approach angles. They memorized his timing. They practiced charging toward destroyers instead of running from them. But the Japanese Navy was learning too. By March 1944, Japanese convoy commanders had received new orders from Tokyo. American submarines were becoming more aggressive. Escort formations must adapt. Depth charge patterns must change. And any submarine that penetrated a convoy screen must be hunted until destroyed, regardless of cost. The kill rate for American submarines attacking heavily escorted convoys had been 7% in 1942. By early 1944, it had dropped to 4%. The Japanese were getting better at killing submarines, and Slade Cutter was about to sail directly into their improved defenses. April 8, 1944. Seahorse departs Pearl Harbor for her 4th war patrol. Destination waters off Guam and Saipan. Intelligence indicates massive Japanese convoy activity. Tokyo is desperate to reinforce the Mariana Islands before the inevitable American invasion. Every transport that reaches Saipan means more troops defending those beaches. Every tanker that arrives means more fuel for Japanese aircraft. Every cargo ship that docks means more ammunition for Japanese artillery. Admiral Lockwood gives Cutter simple orders. Stop those convoys, by any means necessary. But Cutter faces a problem he has never encountered before. The Japanese have changed their tactics specifically because of submarines like Seahorse. Convoy escorts now operate in groups of 8 to 12 destroyers, instead of 5 to 7. They use overlapping sonar coverage that eliminates the gaps Cutter exploited before. They drop depth charges in coordinated patterns calculated by mathematicians in Tokyo to maximize kill probability. And they have deployed a new weapon aircraft equipped with magnetic anomaly detectors that can locate submerged submarines from 500 feet altitude. The old tactics will not work anymore. Cutter needs new ones. April 9th, 0300 hours. Seahorse is running on the surface 200 miles west of Guam when radar picks up a contact. Cutter raises his binoculars and counts 15 ships, cargo vessels, troop transports, tankers, and surrounding them 9 destroyers in a formation he has never seen before. The destroyers are not positioned in a simple perimeter. They are arranged in 3 concentric rings. The outer ring sweeps for submarines at 4,000 yards. The middle ring provides backup at 2,000 yards. The inner ring stays close to the convoy, ready to counterattack any submarine that penetrates the first 2 layers. This formation has no gaps, no weaknesses, no approach angle that does not require passing through at least 2 destroyer screens. Cutter's executive officer studies the formation through his own binoculars. "Skipper, this is different. We cannot get inside that screen without being detected." Cutter does not respond immediately. He watches the convoy for 15 minutes, timing the zigzag pattern, counting the seconds between destroyer sweeps. looking for something no one else can see. Then he smiles. The middle ring. Watch the third destroyer from the left. The executive officer watches. At first he sees nothing unusual. Then he notices it. Every 12 minutes when the convoy changes course, that destroyer takes 90 seconds longer than the others to reposition. The gap is tiny, maybe 400 yards, maybe 45 seconds of opportunity. That is where we go in. Sir, 45 seconds is not enough time to penetrate and fire. We do not fire during the gap. We use the gap to position ourselves inside the middle ring. Then we wait. When the convoy zigzags again, we will be inside their formation, close enough to shoot, close enough that their own depth charges become a danger to their own ships. The plan is insane. It requires threading Seahorse through a 400-yard gap while destroyers pass on both sides. It requires hiding inside an enemy formation for 12 minutes without being detected. It requires perfect timing, perfect silence, and perfect nerve. Cutter orders battle stations, 0347 hours. Seahorse submerges to periscope depth. The convoy is 6,000 yards ahead. The outer destroyer ring passes overhead. Sonar pings echo through the hull. The operators do not detect Seahorse. Cutter has positioned his boat in the acoustic shadow of a thermal layer, a band of colder water that bends sonar waves away from the submarine. 0359 hours. The convoy changes course. The gap appears. Cutter orders flank speed. Seahorse surges forward at 9 knots. The middle ring destroyers are repositioning. For 45 seconds there is a hole in their coverage. Seahorse races through it. 0400 hours. The gap closes. Destroyers pass within 200 yards on both sides. Their propeller noise fills the submarine. Every man aboard holds his breath. The destroyers do not detect them. Seahorse is now inside the middle ring. Surrounded by Japanese warships, 1,400 yards from the convoy's largest target, the converted submarine tender Aratama Maru, 6,584 tons loaded with torpedoes and ammunition destined for Japanese submarine bases. Cutter waits. The convoy zigzags again at 0412 hours. When the ships turn, Aratama Maru's broadside is exposed. Cutter fires 4 torpedoes. 2 hit. The explosion is unlike anything his crew has witnessed. Aratama Maru is carrying 200 torpedoes. When Cutter's weapons detonate her ammunition storage, the secondary explosion generates a shockwave that travels through the water at 3,400 miles per hour. The blast wave strikes 2 nearby freighters hard enough to rupture their hulls below the waterline. 3 ships. 2 torpedoes. 12,000 tons destroyed in 4 seconds. The destroyers go berserk. 9 warships converge on the explosion zone. Depth charges rain down. But they are dropping charges where Aratama Maru exploded, not where Seahorse is. Cutter has already moved 800 yards away, using the chaos and noise to mask his escape. Over the next 6 hours, the destroyers drop 89 depth charges. None come within 300 yards of Seahorse. When Cutter surfaces that night to charge batteries, his crew is euphoric. But Cutter is not satisfied. He has neutralized 3 ships. There are still 12 more in that convoy. He follows them for another 48 hours. April 11th, 2200 hours. The convoy has lost 3 destroyers to escort other damaged ships back to port. Only 6 escorts remain. Cutter attacks again. He fires 6 torpedoes at Mimasaka Maru, 4 667 tons. 3 hit. She sinks in 7 minutes. April 14th. The same convoy, now reduced to 11 ships and 5 escorts, passes within radar range of Seahorse again. Cutter has been shadowing them for 6 days. His crew is exhausted. His torpedoes are running low. But the convoy is heading towards Saipan, where American Marines will land in 2 months. Every ship that reaches Saipan is a ship that kills Americans. Cutter attacks one final time. He sinks Kizugawa Maru, 915 tons with 2 torpedoes. Total, from this single convoy pursuit, 5 ships, 24,000 tons, over 1,800 enemy personnel killed. More importantly, the 200 torpedoes aboard Aratama Maru will never arm Japanese submarines. The fuel aboard the tankers will never power Japanese aircraft. The troops aboard the transports will never defend Saipan's beaches. But Qatar is not done with this patrol. April 20th. Seahorse is serving as lifeguard for American carrier airstrikes on Saipan. Her mission is to rescue downed pilots. Boring work compared to convoy hunting. Then lookouts spot something unexpected. A submarine. On the surface. 800 yards away. Japanese submarine I-174, returning from a patrol, has surfaced to charge batteries without checking for American presence. Qatar has perhaps 30 seconds before I-174 submerges. He fires 2 torpedoes down the throat. Both hit. I-174 breaks in half and sinks in 40 seconds. She becomes one of only 7 Japanese submarines destroyed by American submarines during the entire Pacific War. April 27th. Another convoy. Another attack. Akigawa Maru, 244 tons, goes down with 3 torpedo hits. Seahorse returns to Pearl Harbor on May 4, 1944. In 27 days, Qatar has sunk 7 ships, totaling over 32,000 tons, plus 1 enemy submarine. He has survived over 150 depth charges. He has proven that the new Japanese defensive tactics can be beaten. Admiral Lockwood awards Qatar his 3rd Navy Cross. But the real impact of Qatar's 4th patrol is not measured in tonnage. It is measured in what did not happen. When American Marines landed on Saipan on June 15, 1944, Japanese defenders reported critical shortages. Not enough torpedoes for their submarines. Not enough fuel for sustained air operations. Not enough troops to man all defensive positions. Japanese commanders blamed supply failures. They blamed the convoy system. They blamed bad luck. They did not know that a single submarine commander from Illinois had systematically destroyed their reinforcement convoys for 3 straight months. Qatar's 5th patrol begins June 1, 1944. The invasion of Saipan is 2 weeks away. Every submarine in the Pacific is hunting Japanese shipping. But Qatar draws a different mission. Scout the Philippine Sea. Find the Japanese fleet. Report their position. On June 15th, while American Marines storm Saipan's beaches, Qatar spots smoke on the horizon. He closes to investigate. What he sees stops his heart. 6 aircraft carriers, 4 battleships, 5 heavy cruisers, dozens of destroyers. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's entire mobile fleet. 55 warships, 430 aircraft. The largest Japanese naval force assembled since Midway. And they are heading directly toward the American invasion fleet at Saipan. Qatar cannot attack. There are too many escorts. Any approach would be suicide. But he can do something more important. He gets off a contact report. Position. Course. Speed. Composition. Everything Admiral Raymond Spruance needs to intercept. Spruance redirects his carriers. 2 days later, the Battle of the Philippine Sea becomes the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. American pilots destroy 330 Japanese aircraft in a single day. 3 Japanese carriers are sunk. Ozawa's fleet retreats and never poses a serious threat again. Qatar's role in the battle is a footnote in history books. But without his contact report, Spruance would not have known where to position his forces. The battle might have gone differently. The invasion of Saipan might have failed. The war might have lasted longer. By July 1944, Seahorse has completed 5 war patrols under Qatar's command. Total ships sunk 19, confirmed, several more probable. Total tonnage over 72,000 tons verified. Enemy personnel killed, estimated 4,500. Depth charges survived over 200. Slade Qatar is now tied with Dudley Morton and trails only Richard O'Kane for the title of most successful submarine commander in the Pacific War. He receives his 4th Navy Cross. Only 5 American submariners earned 4 Navy crosses during World War II. Cutter is one of them. The submarine force has transformed. Commanders who once hesitated now attack aggressively. Tactics that seemed suicidal in 1942 are standard doctrine in 1944. Japanese shipping losses have increased from 725,000 tons in 1942 to over 2.7 million tons in 1944. The convoy system is collapsing. Japanese industry is starving. The empire is dying. And one man from a farming town in Illinois helped kill it. But here is the question no one asks. What happens to Slade Cutter after the war? He sank 50 ships. He survived 200 depth charges. He earned 4 Navy crosses. He helped win the Pacific War. And then he disappeared into obscurity. No admiralty, no fame, no Hollywood movie. A man who should have been celebrated as one of the greatest warriors in American history retired as a captain and spent his final years in a nursing home with Parkinson's disease. In Part 4, we discover why, and what his story teaches us about the difference between winning battles and winning recognition. The answer might surprise you. A flute champion from Illinois, an All-American football player who kicked the impossible field goal, a submarine commander who tracked convoys for 80 hours, survived over 200 depth charges, and sank more enemy ships than almost anyone in American history. In Part 1, you watched Slade Cutter transform from a peacetime officer into the commander of USS Seahorse. In Part 2, you saw him develop tactics so aggressive that other commanders thought he was insane. In Part 3, you witnessed those tactics destroy Japanese shipping at a rate that helped starve an empire. 19 confirmed ships. Over 72,000 tons. 4 Navy crosses. A record that placed him among the 3 deadliest submarine commanders of World War II. But here is what the history books do not tell you. Slade Cutter never became an admiral. He never received the Medal of Honor. He never had a ship named after him during his lifetime. He retired as a captain and spent his final years in a nursing home, his hands trembling from Parkinson's disease watching younger officers who had accomplished far less receive far more recognition. This is the twist no one expects, because sometimes winning the war is not enough. When Japan surrendered on September 2, 1945, Slade Cutter was commanding USS Requin, a brand new submarine that had arrived at Pearl Harbor just 2 weeks before the atomic bombs fell. He never fired a torpedo from Requin. The war ended before he could complete a single combat patrol in his new command. For most officers, this would have been a relief. Survival, victory, home. For Cutter, it was unfinished business. He had spent 3 years perfecting the art of killing enemy ships. He had developed tactics that other commanders studied like scripture. He had proven that aggressive action executed with precision was safer than cautious hesitation. And now suddenly, there were no more ships to sink. The transition to peacetime was brutal for men like Cutter. In war, aggression was rewarded. Initiative was celebrated. Results mattered more than politics. But in peacetime, the Navy reverted to its traditional culture. Promotion depended on connections. Advancement required playing the game. Success meant knowing whose hand to shake and whose ego to flatter. Slade Cutter did not play games. He commanded the heavy cruiser USS Northampton after the war flagship of the United States Second Fleet. He served with distinction. His fitness reports were excellent. His superiors praised his leadership. But when promotion boards met to select new admirals, Cutter's name was passed over. Again, and again, and again. The official reasons were never stated, but the unofficial reasons were well known throughout the Navy. Cutter spoke his mind. He disagreed with superiors publicly when he thought they were wrong. He refused to cultivate political relationships. He believed that performance should speak for itself. In the peacetime Navy, performance was not enough. In 1958, Cutter was assigned as athletic director of the United States Naval Academy. It was a prestigious position, but it was also a signal. He would not be commanding fleets. He would not be making strategy. He would be organizing football games and track meets. The irony was perfect and painful. The man who had used football mentality to revolutionize submarine warfare was now managing actual football. Cutter served as athletic director until 1962. He retired from the Navy in 1965 with the rank of captain. Not rear admiral, not vice admiral, captain. He moved to Annapolis, Maryland, and lived quietly. He rarely spoke about his war record. When reporters occasionally sought him out for interviews about submarine warfare, he gave brief, modest answers. He deflected praise. He credited his crew. He made his accomplishments sound routine. But his legacy was anything but routine. The tactics Slade Cutter developed aboard Seahorse did not die when the war ended. They evolved. They spread. They became the foundation of modern submarine warfare doctrine. The concept of aggressive pursuit, tracking a target for days instead of hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, that concept became standard practice for American attack submarines during the Cold War. When USS Nautilus, the world's first nuclear submarine, began operations in 1954, her commanders studied Cutter's patrol reports. When American submarines shadowed Soviet ballistic missile submarines throughout the 1960s and 1970s, they used techniques Cutter had pioneered. The idea of charging toward a threat instead of running from it, the counterintuitive tactic that saved Seahorse from 127 depth charges, that idea influenced anti-submarine warfare training for decades. American destroyer captains learned to expect aggressive submarine commanders. They developed new tactics specifically to counter the Cutter approach. And the mathematical precision Cutter brought to combat, the cold calculation of risk versus reward, the understanding that apparent recklessness could actually be safer than apparent caution, that philosophy shaped American military thinking far beyond submarines. During the Vietnam War, American fighter pilots adopted similar principles. The old doctrine of cautious engagement gave way to aggressive tactics that accepted higher short-term risk for better long-term survival rates. The Navy's Top Gun School, established in 1969, taught the same fundamental lesson Cutter had demonstrated in 1944. Attack. Press the advantage. Make the enemy react to you. By the time of the Gulf War in 1991, American military doctrine had fully embraced the Cutter philosophy. Speed, aggression, initiative. The overwhelming success of Operation Desert Storm owed something to a submarine commander who had retired 26 years earlier. The numbers tell the story. American submarines sank approximately 1,300 Japanese merchant ships during World War II, totaling over 5 million tons. They destroyed 200 warships, including 8 aircraft carriers and 11 cruisers. They cut Japan's oil imports by 90%. They starved Japanese industry of raw materials. They made the naval blockade that ended the war possible. Slade Cutter personally accounted for 19 of those ships and over 72,000 tons. His tactics, adopted by other commanders, contributed to hundreds more. But the lesson of Cutter's career is not about tonnage or tactics. The lesson is about institutions and innovation. Every military organization faces the same problem. In peacetime, cautious officers rise through the ranks. They follow procedures. They avoid controversy. They make excellent bureaucrats. But when war comes, bureaucrats get people killed. The skills that succeed in peacetime: political sensitivity, risk aversion, consensus building, those skills are liabilities in combat. The American submarine force in 1941 was led by cautious officers. They had spent 20 years following peacetime procedures. When war came, they hesitated. They fired from extreme ranges. They broke contact at the first sign of danger. And they failed. Admiral Lockwood recognized the problem. He relieved 30 commanders for insufficient aggression between 1942 and 1944. He promoted officers like Cutter, who understood that war requires different skills than peace. But when the war ended, the Navy reverted to type. The aggressive commanders who had won the war were gradually replaced by the cautious administrators who thrive in peacetime. Cutter, who had been perfect for war, was wrong for peace. This pattern repeats throughout history. Ulysses Grant won the Civil War and struggled as president. George Patton conquered Europe and was sidelined after victory. The skills that win wars are not the skills that win promotions. And yet institutions need both types of leaders. They need administrators to maintain order in peacetime. They need warriors to survive in war. The challenge is recognizing which type you need and when. Slade Cutter was a warrior in an era that needed warriors. When that era ended, his value diminished. Not because he had changed, but because circumstances had changed around him. There is one final detail that most people do not know. When Slade Cutter died on June 9, 2005 at age 93, he was living at Ginger Cove Retirement Community in Annapolis. His hands shook from Parkinson's disease. His memory was fading, but he still received visitors. One of those visitors was a young submarine officer who had read Cutter's patrol reports as part of his training. The officer asked Cutter what he remembered most from the war. Cutter thought for a long moment. Then he said something the officer never forgot. "I remember the sounds. Depth charges sound like someone hitting the hull with a giant hammer. Torpedoes hitting a ship sound like thunder underwater. But the sound I remember most is silence. After an attack, when you are running deep and quiet, trying not to breathe, listening for destroyers. That silence was louder than any explosion." The officer asked if Cutter ever felt afraid. "Every time. Fear keeps you sharp. The commanders who stopped being afraid made mistakes. I was afraid for 3 years straight. It probably saved my life." The officer asked one more question. "Looking back, would you do anything differently?" Cutter smiled. "I would have sunk more ships." He died 3 months later. His headstone at the United States Naval Academy Cemetery lists his rank, his dates of service, and 4 words: 4 Navy Crosses. No mention of the 19 ships. No mention of the 80-hour chase. No mention of the 200 depth charges. No mention of the tactics that changed submarine warfare forever. Some things do not fit on headstones. In 2005, years before his death, the Navy finally honored Cutter appropriately. The guided missile destroyer USS Cutter was commissioned with his name. His wife Fran, who had sponsored Seahorse 55 years earlier, sponsored this ship as well. She was 89 years old. She died 2 years later. The ceremony was small. Most Americans had never heard of Slade Cutter. Most never would. But every submarine officer who studied at the Naval Academy walked past his name in Memorial Hall. Every attack submarine commander who tracked an enemy vessel for days instead of hours was using his tactics. Every military strategist who argued that aggressive action could be safer than cautious defense was echoing his philosophy. From a flute-playing farm boy to the second deadliest submarine commander in American history. From a man who kicked a field goal through ankle-deep mud to a warrior who charged toward destroyers instead of running from them. From an officer who refused to play political games to a legend whose tactics are still studied 80 years later. Slade Cutter proved that the most dangerous thing you can do in a fight is hesitate. He proved that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. He proved that institutions often fail to recognize their greatest assets until those assets are gone. And he proved that some men are built for war in ways that peace can never accommodate. 19 ships, 72,000 tons, 4 Navy Crosses, over 200 depth charges survived. One submarine commander who changed everything. That is the legacy of Slade DeVille Cutter. If you know another story of an ordinary person whose crazy idea changed military history, share it in the comments. These stories deserve to be remembered. Because Cutter's final lesson is the most important one. Some people wait their whole lives for the right opportunity. Slade Cutter spent his life creating them. And when 50 destroyers chased him across the Pacific, he turned around and sank their convoys anyway. Because that is what you do when you are Slade Cutter. You play to win.